The dust clouds on the horizon spelled trouble for Kingman, Arizona, long before the sound of thundering hooves reached the town limits. Zara Winters clutched her medical bag closer to her chest as she hurried along the main street, painfully aware that the approaching riders weren't bringing good news to anyone in this struggling mining town of 1876. Zara had come to Kingman only 3 months prior, arriving with determination to establish herself as the town's first female doctor. At 24, she'd fought through medical school in Philadelphia with a tenacity that surprised even herself. The West had beckoned with its promise of opportunity, an escape from the whispers that followed her father's financial ruin and subsequent suicide. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street as Zara quickened her pace. She had just finished treating young Tommy Miller's broken arm and wanted to return to her small office before dark. The territorial days were dangerous enough for a woman alone, but something about the approaching riders sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cooling desert air. "Miss Winters," Sheriff Dawson called from the jailhouse porch. "Best get inside quick. Those look like the Creed brothers coming." Zara nodded gratefully at the aging lawman. The Creed gang had been terrorizing small towns across the territory for months, robbing, intimidating, and worse. She hurried her steps, the wooden boardwalk creaking beneath her practical boots. Her office was still 2 buildings away when the first riders thundered into town. 5 men on lathered horses pulled up short, their mounts kicking up clouds of dust that obscured the setting sun. Leading them was Silas Creed himself, a man whose reputation for casual cruelty had spread throughout the territory. His face was partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed black hat, but his cold eyes scanned the street with predatory intent. "Look what we have here, boys," Creed called out, his voice carrying easily in the sudden stillness of the main street. "A proper lady doctor, if I ain't mistaken." Zara froze, her hand on the doorknob of her office. How did he know who she was? "Keep walking, miss," the sheriff called, his hand hovering near his pistol. But it was too late. 2 of the riders had already dismounted and were approaching her with purpose. Zara turned the knob desperately, but in her panic, she fumbled with the key. "We got ourselves a situation, Doc," the taller of the 2 men said, grabbing her arm roughly. "Our friend took a bullet outside of Prescott. Need your special touch." I can treat him here in my office," Zara stammered, trying to maintain her professional composure despite her racing heart. Silas Creed laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "That ain't how this works. You're coming with us to the Rusty Nail. That's where our friend is waiting." The Rusty Nail was the rowdiest saloon in Kingman, a place Zara deliberately avoided. No respectable woman went there, especially not alone. "Please, I have medical supplies here that I'll need," she began, but her words were cut short as the men grabbed both her arms. "Sheriff," she called out desperately as they began dragging her down the street toward the saloon. Sheriff Dawson stepped forward, his hand now on his gun. "Let her go, Creed. She's just trying to help folks around here." "And she's going to help my brother," Creed replied coldly. "Unless you want to die today, old man, I suggest you stay put." 3 of the gang members had trained their weapons on the sheriff, who hesitated, his weathered face contorted with indecision. At 63, Thomas Dawson knew his limitations, and he knew that dying here would help no one. "I'll be all right, Sheriff," Zara called, summoning courage she didn't feel. "I'll treat their wounded and be on my way." The resignation in the sheriff's eyes told her he knew better, but he nodded slowly, stepping back onto the jailhouse porch. "I'll be watching, Creed," he warned. Zara was half-dragged, half-marched down the dusty main street toward the Rusty Nail, her medical bag still clutched tightly in her hands. Townsfolk who had ventured outside quickly retreated indoors, doors slamming and curtains drawing closed. No one wanted to catch the attention of the Creed gang. As they approached the saloon, The sound of a piano being badly played spilled out into the street, along with raucous laughter and the clinking of glasses. Zara's heart pounded so hard she feared it might burst from her chest. The stories she'd heard about what happened to women who crossed paths with outlaws like the Creeds made her blood run cold. The batwing doors of the Rusty Nail were thrust open, and Zara was shoved inside. The piano music stopped abruptly. The dozen or so men inside, miners, cowboys, and drifters, all turned to stare. Some looked away quickly, not wanting to get involved. Others leered openly at the sight of a proper woman being manhandled into their domain. "Got us a doctor, boys," Silas announced, grabbing a bottle of whiskey off the bar as they passed. In the back corner of the saloon, a man lay sprawled across a table, his face pale and drawn with pain. Blood had soaked through his shirt on the right side, just below his ribs. "That's Jasper, my younger brother," Silas explained, suddenly all business. "Fix him." Zara took a deep breath, forcing her professional training to override her fear. "I need hot water, clean cloths, and better light," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "You heard the lady." Silas barked at the bartender, who jumped to obey. Zara set her medical bag on a nearby chair and approached the wounded man. Jasper Creed couldn't have been more than 25, with the same sharp features as his older brother but lacking the cold cruelty in his eyes. Pain had replaced any menace that might normally reside there. "How long ago was he shot?" Zara asked, carefully cutting away the blood-soaked shirt. "Yesterday morning," one of the gang members replied. "Bastard bank guard got lucky. So they'd robbed a bank in Prescott." Zara tried not to react to this information as she examined the wound. The bullet had entered cleanly, but it was still inside, and infection had already begun to set in. The angry red skin around the wound concerned her. "I need to remove the bullet and clean the wound thoroughly," she said. "It's going to be painful." Silas thrust the bottle of whiskey toward his brother. "Drink up, Jasper. Doc's about to dig around in your insides." Outside the Rusty Nail, a lone rider approached Kingman from the Eastern Trail. The setting sun at his back cast his shadow long before him as he guided his horse at a steady pace into town. Unlike the Creed gang's dramatic entrance, this rider moved with purpose, but without unnecessary show. Isaac Foster had been riding for 2 days straight, stopping only when absolutely necessary. The former Texas Ranger had been tracking the Creed gang since they'd murdered a family outside of Tucson the previous month. Unlike the local lawmen who were confined to their jurisdictions, Isaac moved freely across the territory, following the trail of violence and robbery the Creeds left in their wake. At 30, Isaac had seen more bloodshed than most men twice his age. His time with the Rangers had hardened him, but it was the death of his young wife 3 years earlier that had truly changed him. Since then, he'd become a bounty hunter with a reputation for bringing in the territory's most dangerous criminals alive when possible, but dead when necessary. As he rode slowly down Kingman's Main Street, Isaac noted the unusual stillness. Doors were closed, shutters drawn. The only establishment showing signs of activity was the Rusty Nail Saloon, where horses bearing the distinctive C brand of the Creed gang were hitched outside. Isaac dismounted in front of the sheriff's office, tying his bay gelding to the hitching post. Sheriff Dawson emerged from the doorway, relief washing over his face at the sight of the tall stranger. "You're a sight for sore eyes, Foster," Dawson said, extending his hand. "Been expecting you since I sent that telegram to Prescott." Isaac shook the sheriff's hand. "The Creeds, all 5 of them, plus Jasper, who's wounded from what I gather." Dawson lowered his voice. "They've taken our town doctor inside. Young woman, name's Winters. I'm afraid they don't intend to let her leave once she's patched up Jasper." Isaac's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "How long have they been in there?" "Not 15 minutes. been quiet so far. Inside the saloon, Zara worked with steady hands despite her fear. The bartender had provided a lantern that cast adequate light over the wounded man. She had extracted the bullet successfully, cleaned the wound as best she could with the available whiskey, and was now stitching it closed with neat, even sutures. Throughout the procedure, Jasper had alternated between cursing and passing out from the pain. His brother Silas had watched with an intensity that unnerved Zara, occasionally taking swigs from the whiskey bottle. "You've got steady hands, Doc," Silas commented, his voice deceptively casual. "Don't see many women doctors, especially not out here." "There aren't many of us," Zara replied cautiously, tying off the final stitch. "But times are changing," Silas laughed. "Not out here they ain't. Out here, a woman's still good for only a few things." The implication in his words sent a fresh wave of fear through Zara. She focused on bandaging Jasper's wound, trying to hide the trembling that had begun in her fingers. "He needs rest and clean bandages daily," she said, packing her instruments back into her bag. "And he should avoid riding for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Silas scoffed. "We'll be long gone by morning." "Then he'll likely die of infection," Zara stated matter-of-factly, "or the wound will reopen and he'll bleed to death." Silas's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Maybe you should come with us then. Keep an eye on him." "I have patients here who need me," Zara protested, her voice wavering slightly. "I wasn't asking, Doc." Silas moved closer, his hand reaching out to touch her hair. "Besides, the boys and I could use some doctoring too." The other gang members laughed, a chilling sound that made Zara's skin crawl. She took a step back, bumping into the table where Jasper lay. "I've done what you asked," she said firmly, despite her fear. "Now I'd like to return to my office." "In due time," Silas replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. "First, let's have a drink to celebrate Jasper's recovery." The bartender, a heavy-set man named Barlow, reluctantly set up glasses on the bar. The few remaining patrons had either left quietly or retreated to the far corners of the establishment, not wanting to draw attention. Outside, Isaac Foster was methodically checking his weapons. His Colt revolver was fully loaded, as was his Winchester rifle, which he decided to leave secured to his saddle. 5 against 1 weren't odds he'd normally choose, but the woman's presence changed everything. Time wasn't on her side. "You got any deputies?" Isaac asked the sheriff. "Both out of town, escorting a prisoner to Prescott," Dawson replied grimly. "Town council cut the budget. Can't afford more than 2. Isaac nodded, unsurprised. Small towns often couldn't afford adequate law enforcement, which was why men like the Creeds targeted them. "I need to know the layout of that saloon," Isaac said, "and how many civilians might be inside." The sheriff quickly sketched a rough floor plan in the dust with a stick. "Main room here, bar along this wall, back room here where they store the liquor. Stairs to the upper floor where there's 4 rooms the girls use. Most customers likely scattered when the Creeds arrived, but Barlow the bartender will be there, maybe a few others too scared to leave." Isaac committed the layout to memory. "Any back doors?" "One leads to an alley behind." "Good. Give me 5 minutes, then create a distraction out front." Inside the saloon, Zara was being forced to sit at a table with Silas and 2 of his men. The other 2 were keeping watch at the windows, their hands never far from their guns. Jasper remained unconscious on the table where she'd operated. "Drink up, Doc." Silas pushed a glass of whiskey toward her. "It's rude to refuse a toast." Zara reluctantly took the glass but didn't drink. "Mr. Creed, I really must insist on returning to my other patients." Silas's face hardened. "You ain't going nowhere, darling. Not tonight, maybe not tomorrow either." He reached across the table and grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. "We paid for your services and we ain't done with you yet." "You haven't paid me anything," Zara replied, her fear giving way to anger. "And I'm not for sale." The blow came without warning. Silas backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling from the chair onto the sawdust-covered floor. The taste of blood filled her mouth as her lips split from the impact. "Every woman has her price," Silas snarled, standing over her. "You just ain't figured out yours yet." Behind the saloon, Isaac silently approached the back door. It was locked, but the old wood yielded easily to the pressure of his shoulder. Inside was a small storeroom filled with barrels and crates of liquor. Through a partially open door, he could see into the main saloon. The scene that greeted him made his blood boil. A woman, presumably Doctor Winters, was on the floor, blood trickling from her lip as Sela's creed towered over her. The other gang members were laughing, except for one who appeared to be unconscious on a table. Isaac assessed the situation quickly. Two men by the windows, Sela's and two others near the woman, and the wounded Jasper on the table. The bartender was behind the bar, looking terrified, and a few patrons huddled in the corners, unwilling to get involved. Just as Isaac was about to make his move, Sheriff Dawson's voice boomed from outside the front of the saloon. "Creed, this is Sheriff Dawson. I've got a posse of 10 men surrounding this building. Come out with your hands up, or we're coming and shooting." It was a lie. Of course there was no posse, but it created exactly the distraction Isaac needed. The gang members at the windows turned their full attention to the front, and Silas cursed, momentarily forgetting about Zara as he moved toward the batwing doors. "Nobody's out there but that old man." One of the gang members called after peering carefully around the window frame. "Check the back," Silas ordered one of his men. The outlaw nodded and turned toward the storeroom only to find himself staring down the barrel of Isaac's Colt as the bounty hunter emerged from the shadows. "Don't," Isaac said quietly, and the man froze in one fluid motion. Isaac struck the outlaw with the butt of his revolver, dropping him unconscious to the floor. The noise, however slight, caught Silas's attention. "Murphy," Silas called, "what's going on back there?" When no answer came, Silas signaled to another of his men to investigate. As the second outlaw approached the storeroom, Isaac made his move. He burst through the door, firing a shot that caught the approaching man in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the floor with a cry of pain. "It's Foster!" One of the remaining outlaws shouted in recognition, reaching for his gun. Isaac fired again, hitting the man in the chest. He fell backward through the batwing doors onto the boardwalk outside. In the chaos, Zara scrambled behind the bar for cover, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Silas and his remaining man opened fire, forcing Isaac to dive behind an overturned table. Bullets splintered the wood around him as he returned fire carefully, mindful of the civilians still in the building. "You're a dead man, Foster," Silas shouted, reloading his revolver. "Nobody takes down the Creed gang. Already got 3 of you," Isaac called back calmly. "You're next." While Silas kept Isaac pinned down with gunfire, his remaining man circled around toward the bar where Zara was hiding. She saw him approaching and looked desperately for a weapon. Her hand closed around a bottle of bourbon, the only defense available. As the outlaw leaned over the bar to grab her, Zara swung the bottle with all her strength, connecting with the side of his head. The bottle shattered, showering them both with glass and alcohol. The man staggered back, momentarily stunned but not down. With a roar of rage, he lunged for her again, but this time a shot rang out and he fell forward across the bar, dead from Isaac's bullet. Now it was just Silas left, and he knew it. He fired wildly in Isaac's direction, then made a desperate move. He lunged toward the bar and grabbed Zara, yanking her up by her hair and pressing his revolver to her temple. "Drop your gun, Foster, or the lady doctor dies right here." Silas shouted, Using Zara as a shield as he backed toward the door, Isaac rose slowly from behind the table, his Colt still aimed steadily at Sila's. "Let her go, Creed. It's over." "It's over when I say it's over," Silas snarled, tightening his grip on Zara, who winced in pain. "Drop the gun now, or I paint the wall with her brains." Isaac seemed to consider for a moment, then slowly lowered his weapon to the floor, raising his hands. "There, now let her go." "I don't think so," Silas said, continuing to back toward the door. "She's my insurance out of here." Outside, Sheriff Dawson had taken cover behind a water trough across the street. The gunfire from inside the saloon had drawn a small crowd of townspeople, who wisely kept their distance. "You won't make it 10 miles, Isaac said calmly, his eyes locked on Silas's. "Let her go, and maybe you live to see a trial." Silas laughed harshly. "A trial? We both know I'd hang. No, I'm riding out of here, and the doctor's coming with me." As Silas continued to back toward the exit, Isaac's eyes met Zara's. Despite her fear, there was a determined intelligence in her gaze that told him she was thinking, not just panicking. He gave her the slightest nod. Understanding passed between them in that brief moment. When Silas was halfway to the batwing doors, Zara suddenly went limp in his grasp, dropping her weight unexpectedly. Silas instinctively tightened his grip and adjusted his stance exactly as Isaac had hoped. In that split second of distraction, Isaac's hand flashed to his boot, drawing a small derringer hidden there. He fired once, the bullet catching Silas in the right shoulder of his gun arm. The outlaw's revolver discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as he stumbled backward, losing his grip on Zara. She immediately rolled away from him, and Isaac was already in motion, crossing the room in 3 long strides. Before Silas could recover, Isaac's fist connected with his jaw in a devastating blow that sent the outlaw crashing through the batwing doors and onto the boardwalk outside. Sheriff Dawson emerged from his cover, his own revolver trained on the dazed outlaw. "It's over, Creed," the sheriff said, kicking Silas's dropped weapon away. Inside the saloon, Isaac turned to Zara, who was getting shakily to her feet. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been moments before. "Just bruised, I think," she replied, touching her split lip gingerly. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the carnage with professional assessment. "These men need medical attention." "They can wait," Isaac said firmly, leading her to a chair. "You're bleeding." The bartender, emerging from where he'd taken cover during the shooting, quickly brought over a clean cloth and a glass of water. Zara accepted both gratefully, pressing the cloth to her lip while studying the tall stranger who had just saved her life. Isaac Foster cut an imposing figure, standing well over 6 feet with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard physical work. His dark hair was a bit longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at the collar of his worn leather coat. A few days' growth of beard shadowed his strong jawline, and his eyes, a striking blue that reminded Zara of the summer sky, were currently scanning the room for any remaining threats. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice steadier than she'd expected it to be. "You saved my life, Mr. Foster," he supplied, his attention returning to her. "Isaac Foster." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "The bounty hunter." He nodded once, not bothering to explain or justify his profession. "You handled yourself well, Dr. Winters. Not many would have kept their wits about them like that." Before she could respond, Sheriff Dawson entered with Silas Creed in handcuffs. The outlaw's face was a mask of hatred as he looked at Isaac. "This ain't over, Foster," he spat, blood dripping from his split lip. "Not by a long shot." "It's over for you, Creed," Sheriff Dawson said, pushing him toward a chair. "You'll hang for what you've done in Tucson alone." While the sheriff secured Silas to a chair, Isaac turned back to Zara. "Let's get you out of here," he said quietly. "You've seen enough violence for one day." Zara surprised him by shaking her head. I need to check their wounds first, she insisted, gesturing to the injured outlaws. Even criminals deserve medical attention. Isaac raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He'd heard about Dr. Winters's reputation for treating anyone who needed help, regardless of their standing in the community. It was a rare quality, especially in a place like Kingman. Zara rose and moved first to check on Jasper, who remained unconscious through the entire gunfight. His pulse was steady, and the bandages showed no fresh bleeding, a good sign. Next, she examined the man Isaac had shot in the shoulder, determining that the bullet had passed clean through muscle without hitting bone or major blood vessels. "He'll live," she pronounced, fashioning a quick bandage from a clean bar towel. "More than they deserve," Isaac commented, but there was respect in his voice rather than condemnation. Once Zara had seen to the wounded, Isaac insisted on escorting her back to her office. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the ordeal was beginning to wane, and her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her medical bag. Outside, the evening had fully descended on Kingman, the stars appearing in the clear desert sky. A small crowd had gathered, kept at bay by the sheriff's stern warnings. As Isaac led Zara from the saloon, a spontaneous cheer went up from the townspeople. "Seems you've got admirers," Zara observed wryly, uncomfortable with the attention. "They're cheering for you, Doctor," Isaac replied. "Town loves their healer." The walk to her office was brief, but Zara was grateful for Isaac's steady presence beside her. The events at the Rusty Nail had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, even to herself. Her office, a modest single-story building with her living quarters in the back, stood dark and quiet on the edge of the main street. Isaac insisted on checking inside before allowing her to enter, his caution born of years dealing with the territory's most dangerous criminals. "All clear," he announced, lighting a lamp on her desk. The warm glow illuminated the neat, organized space that served as both waiting room and examination area. "Thank you again, Mr. Foster," Zara said, setting her medical bag down with a sigh. "I dread to think what would have happened if you hadn't arrived when you did." Isaac's expression darkened. "Best not to dwell on it." "No, I suppose not." She moved to a small cabinet and withdrew a bottle of brandy and 2 glasses. "Would you care for a drink? For medicinal purposes, of course." A hint of a smile touched Isaac's lips. "Of course." He accepted the glass she offered, studying her as she poured one for herself. In the lamplight, he could see the bruise beginning to form on her cheekbone where Silas had struck her. Despite this, and the ordeal she just endured, she carried herself with dignity and composure that impressed him. "How did you know to come to Kingman?" Zara asked, taking a small sip of her brandy. "Been tracking the Creeds for weeks," Isaac explained. "Sheriff Dawson sent word they'd been spotted heading this way. Didn't know they'd taken you until I arrived." "Well, your timing was impeccable." She gestured to a chair, inviting him to sit while she took the one opposite him. "May I ask why you're hunting them so persistently?" "Is it just for the bounty?" Isaac considered the question as he savored the brandy. It was good quality, better than he'd expected to find in a frontier town like Kingman. "The bounty's part of it," he admitted. "But what they did in Tucson—" He trailed off, his eyes hardening at the memory. "They killed a family, parents, 2 children. Youngest was only 6. Zara's hand flew to her mouth in horror. "Dear God." "I was a ranger before I started bounty hunting," Isaac continued. "Saw plenty of violence, but what the Creeds did." He shook his head. "Some men need stopping." "And you've taken it upon yourself to do the stopping," Zara observed, no judgment in her tone. "Someone has to." He finished his brandy and set the glass down. "Most local lawmen are good men like Dawson, but they're limited by jurisdiction and resources. So you follow where they can't." Isaac nodded. "More or less." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the events of the evening settling around them. Outside, the town was quieting as news of the Creed's capture spread, and the immediate danger passed. "You should have that lip looked at," Isaac finally said, nodding toward her injury. Zara gave a small laugh. "I am a doctor, you know. Hard to stitch your own lip." "I don't think it needs stitches, but thank you for your concern." She rose, moving to a small mirror hanging on the wall to examine the damage. "It looks worse than it feels." Isaac watched her, struck by her resilience. Most women, most people would be falling apart after what she'd been through. Yet here she was, calmly assessing her injuries as if they were just another patient's concern. "How long have you been in Kingman?" he asked. "3 months," she replied, dabbing a bit of antiseptic on her lip and wincing slightly at the sting. "I came from Philadelphia. That's quite a change." "Yes, well, sometimes change is necessary." Something in her tone suggested there was more to the story, but Isaac didn't press. Everyone in the West had a past they'd rather not discuss, himself included. "Will you stay long in town?" Zara asked, changing the subject as she returned to her seat. "A few days at most," Isaac replied. "Need to make sure the Creeds are properly secured for transport to Prescott for trial. Then I'll be moving on." "Always another bounty to collect," he nodded. "Always another outlaw causing trouble somewhere. It sounds like a lonely life." Isaac shrugged. "I'm used to it." But the simple statement held a weight of solitude that Zara recognized all too well. She'd chosen her own form of isolation by coming to Kingman, a woman alone in a town where she had no family or connections, only her profession to define her. The clock on her desk chimed 9, breaking the moment of reflection. "I should go," Isaac said, rising from his chair. "You need rest after today's ordeal." "Yes, I suppose I do," Zara agreed, though the thought of being alone with her thoughts after the day's events was not particularly appealing. "Where are you staying?" "The Ponderosa Hotel, if they have a room. If not, I've slept under the stars plenty of times." "The Ponderosa is comfortable enough, though Mrs. Yates can be rather inquisitive about her guests' business." Isaac smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face from handsome to striking. "I'm sure I can manage her questions." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Lock this behind me. I don't expect trouble, but better safe than sorry," Zara finished for him. "I will." Isaac nodded, satisfied. "Good night, Dr. Winters." "Good night, Mr. Foster, and thank you again." After he left, Zara carefully locked the door as instructed and leaned her back against it, finally allowing the trembling that she'd been suppressing to overtake her. The reality of how close she'd come to a fate worse than death hit her full force, and tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. She sank down to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest as she permitted herself this moment of vulnerability that she couldn't show to the town, to her patients, or even to the man who had saved her. For several minutes, she sat there in the dim lamplight, silent tears streaming down her face. Finally, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, Zara rose. She was alive. She was safe. And tomorrow would bring new patients who needed her strength, not her tears. The next morning dawned clear and cool, typical for early April in the Arizona Territory. Zara rose early, as was her habit, though sleep had been elusive. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen Silas Creed's face leering at her, felt the cold press of his revolver against her temple. After washing and dressing, she examined her injuries in the mirror. Her lip had swollen somewhat, and the bruise on her cheek had darkened to an ugly purple, but neither would impede her work. A bit of powder would help conceal the worst of it from her more sensitive patients. She had just finished preparing her office for the day when a knock came at the door. It was earlier than her usual consultation hours, but emergencies didn't adhere to schedules. When she opened the door, however, it wasn't a patient but Isaac Foster who stood on her porch. "Mr. Foster," she greeted him, surprised. "Is everything all right?" "Just checking that you're well this morning," he replied, his eyes taking in her appearance with a thoroughness that suggested he was looking for signs of distress rather than admiring her modest blue dress. "I'm fine," she assured him, stepping back to allow him entry. "A bit tired, perhaps, but otherwise unharmed." Isaac nodded, seemingly satisfied with her assessment. He looked different in the morning light, still imposing, but somehow more approachable. He'd shaved, she noticed, and his dark hair was neatly combed. The worn leather coat of the previous evening had been replaced with a simple dark vest over a clean white shirt. "I've just made coffee," Zara offered. "Would you care for some?" "Much obliged," he accepted, removing his hat as he followed her to the small kitchen area at the back of her office. As she poured 2 cups, she asked, "How are the prisoners?" "Secure. Sheriff's got them locked up tight. Jasper Creed was asking for you this morning, said his wound was paining him something fierce." Zara nodded, unsurprised. "I'll stop by the jail later to check on him." The wound was significant, and infection is always a risk. She handed Isaac a cup of coffee, which he accepted with a murmured thanks. For a moment they stood in comfortable silence, each sipping the hot beverage. "The stage to Prescott leaves tomorrow," Isaac finally said. "Sheriff Dawson's arranged for extra guards to transport the Creeds for trial. Will you be going with them?" "Yes. My testimony will be needed, especially for the Tucson murders." Zara nodded, feeling an unexpected disappointment at the news of his imminent departure. "Of course. I imagine there's a substantial reward waiting for you as well." "There is," he acknowledged. "But before I go, I was hoping you might join me for supper this evening." The invitation surprised her, though not unpleasantly. "Supper? At the hotel dining room," he clarified. "Nothing improper. I just thought you might appreciate a meal you didn't have to cook yourself after yesterday's ordeal." Zara considered the offer. Dining in public with a man would certainly set the town's gossips chattering, but after facing down the Creed gang, the prospect of a few wagging tongues seemed trivial by comparison. "I'd be delighted," she decided. "What time shall I meet you?" 6 o'clock. I can collect you here." "That would be lovely, thank you." Their arrangements made, Isaac finished his coffee and prepared to leave. "I need to help the sheriff secure the prisoners for transport. Are you sure you'll be all right visiting the jail later?" "I'll be fine," Zara assured him. "They're behind bars now, and I'm a doctor first and foremost. My personal feelings toward them don't affect my professional obligations." Isaac studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You're an unusual woman, Dr. Winters. I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Foster. It was intended as one." After Isaac left, Zara found herself smiling despite the lingering ache in her cheek. There was something about the bounty hunter that intrigued her, a complexity beneath his stoic exterior that she found herself wanting to explore further. But such thoughts would have to wait. Her first patient of the day, Mrs. Everett with her chronic rheumatism, would be arriving shortly, and Zara needed to focus on her duties. The morning passed quickly with a steady stream of patients. Most expressed concern about her visible injuries, and news of her ordeal at the hands of the Creed gang had clearly spread throughout the town. By noon, Zara had received 3 casseroles, a freshly baked apple pie, and numerous offers of assistance from the townsfolk. After her last morning patient departed, Zara gathered some medical supplies and made her way to the jailhouse. Sheriff Dawson greeted her with concern. "You sure you want to do this, Doc? No one would blame you if you didn't want to see those men again." "I'm sure, Sheriff," Zara replied firmly. "I need to check Jasper Creed's wound, and I should examine the man with the shoulder injury as well." The sheriff nodded reluctantly and led her to the cells. The Creed brothers and their 2 surviving gang members were confined in 2 separate cells, Silas and one man in one, Jasper and the injured outlaw in the other. Silas Creed smirked when he saw her. "Well, if it ain't the angel of mercy herself," he drawled. "Come back for more." "That's enough, Creed," Sheriff Dawson warned. "I'm here to check on your brother and your friend," Zara stated calmly, ignoring Silas's baiting. "Nothing more." The sheriff unlocked the cell where Jasper lay on a narrow cot, his face pale with pain. The other wounded man sat on the second cot, his arm in a rough sling. "I'll be right outside, Doc," Sheriff Dawson said. "Anything happens, you just call." Zara nodded her thanks and approached Jasper first. The youngest Creed looked even worse than he had the previous day, his skin clammy and his breathing shallow. "His fever's higher," she noted, placing a hand on his forehead. "I need to check the wound." Carefully, she removed the bandages she'd applied the day before. The wound looked angry and inflamed, clear signs of infection setting in despite her best efforts. "He needs more thorough treatment than I can provide here," Zara told the sheriff. "Ideally, he should be in my office where I have proper equipment and medicines." "That ain't happening," Sheriff Dawson said firmly. "These men aren't leaving these cells until they board the stage to Prescott tomorrow." Zara understood the sheriff's caution but worried about her patient. "Then I'll need to bring supplies here." "He needs stronger medicine for the infection, or he might not survive the journey to Prescott." "Do what you need to, Doc, but be quick about it. I don't like you spending any more time with these animals than necessary." After examining the other wounded man and determining that his injury was healing adequately, Zara hurried back to her office to gather the supplies she needed for Jasper's treatment. As she was packing a bag with antiseptics and febrifuges, the door opened and Isaac entered. "Sheriff Dawson said I'd find you here," he explained. "Said you were concerned about Jasper Creed's condition." Zara nodded, continuing to gather supplies. "The wound is infected, as I feared it might be. Without proper treatment, he likely won't survive the journey to Prescott." "Would that be such a loss?" Isaac asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. Zara paused, looking up at him. "Every life has value, Mr. Foster, even those who have done terrible things. Besides, he deserves a trial just as his brother does." Isaac studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll carry your supplies back to the jail. Thank you." As they walked together down the main street, several townsfolk called out greetings to Zara, their expressions curious as they noted her companion. Isaac seemed oblivious to the attention, but Zara was acutely aware of the stir they were causing. "I believe we're becoming the subject of town gossip," she commented wryly. Isaac glanced around, noticing the interested looks for the first time. "Does that bother you?" "Not particularly. I've been the subject of gossip before." "In Philadelphia?" "Yes." She didn't elaborate, and Isaac didn't press. At the jailhouse, Zara administered a stronger course of treatment to Jasper, cleaning the wound again and applying a poultice to draw out the infection. She left detailed instructions with the sheriff for his care over the next 24 hours. "If his fever spikes dangerously high, send for me immediately," she instructed. "Otherwise, change the poultice every 4 hours as I've shown you." Sheriff Dawson nodded, clearly uncomfortable with his new nursing duties, but understanding their necessity. "I'll do my best, Doc." As Zara and Isaac left the jailhouse, she felt Silas Creed's eyes following her, his gaze sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "He can't hurt you anymore," Isaac said quietly, noticing her reaction. "I know. It's foolish to be affected by a mere look." "Not foolish at all. Men like Creed leave their mark on those they encounter, even briefly. The fact that you can still face him shows your courage." His words were unexpectedly comforting. "Thank you for saying that." They parted ways at her office, agreeing to meet again at 6 for dinner. As Zara watched Isaac walk away, she wondered at the strange connection she felt forming between them, a man of violence and a healer, drawn together by circumstances neither could have predicted. That evening, Zara took extra care with her appearance. She chose her best dress, a deep burgundy silk that she rarely had occasion to wear in Kingman, and arranged her honey blonde hair in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun. A touch of powder helped conceal the worst of the bruising on her face. When Isaac arrived promptly at 6, his appreciative gaze told her that her efforts had been worthwhile. He too had dressed for the occasion, wearing a well-tailored dark suit that suggested he wasn't always the rough bounty hunter he appeared to be. "You look lovely," he said simply, offering his arm. "Thank you," Zara replied, taking it. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Foster." The hotel dining room was the finest establishment in Kingman, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards, but represented the height of local sophistication. Heads turned as they entered, and Zara was conscious of being the center of attention in a way that went beyond her usual notoriety as the town's only female doctor. The maitre d' led them to a table by the window, where Isaac pulled out her chair with a gentlemanly flourish that surprised her. For a man who spent most of his time tracking outlaws through the wilderness, he possessed unexpected refinement. "I confess I'm curious," Zara said once they were settled and had ordered their meals. "You have the manners of a gentleman, yet you've chosen a life that's anything but genteel." Isaac smiled slightly. "My mother would be pleased to hear her lessons weren't entirely wasted. She raised you to be a gentleman," she tried. "My father was a Boston merchant. They had aspirations for me to join the family business, maybe even enter politics eventually. What happened?" Isaac's expression grew distant. "The war happened. I enlisted in '61, spent 4 years fighting for the Union, came back a different man than the one who left. The family business seemed meaningless after what I'd seen." Zara nodded in understanding. "Many men found it difficult to return to normal life after the war. I drifted west, eventually joined the Texas Rangers, found I had a talent for tracking, for bringing in men who didn't want to be found." He shrugged. "The rest followed naturally. And your family?" "My parents passed during the war influenza. I have a sister in Boston, married well. We correspond occasionally." Their meals arrived: a well-prepared beefsteak for Isaac and roasted chicken for Zara, providing a brief interruption to their conversation. "And what of you, Dr. Winters?" Isaac asked when they were alone again. "What brings a Philadelphia doctor to Kingman?" Zara hesitated, unused to sharing her past, but something about Isaac invited confidence. "My father was a banker in Philadelphia," she began. "He made some poor investments, lost everything. Rather than face the scandal, he took his own life." Isaac's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry. In the aftermath, I found that many doors that had been open to me as a doctor suddenly closed. The scandal tainted everything." She took a sip of wine. "I decided a fresh start was needed, somewhere my family name wouldn't matter." "And you chose the Arizona territory." "Yes, there are precious few doctors out here, and even fewer who would question a woman's right to practice if she proved competent." She smiled wryly. "Beggars can't be choosers, after all, and frontier towns are desperate for medical care." "Their good fortune," Isaac observed, "though I imagine it's been a significant adjustment." "It has, but I've found satisfaction in my work here that I never experienced in Philadelphia. There, I was constantly fighting to be taken seriously. Here, results matter more than gender." As their dinner continued, the conversation flowed easily between them. Isaac shared stories of his time with the Rangers and some of his more unusual bounty hunting experiences, while Zara told him about the challenges and rewards of frontier medicine. By the time they finished their meal, Zara realized that she had enjoyed herself more than she had in months, perhaps years. There was something refreshing about Isaac's direct manner, his lack of pretense, and his evident respect for her profession and independence. "Would you care for a walk before I escort you home?" Isaac suggested as they left the hotel. "The evening's pleasant enough." "I'd like that," Zara agreed. They strolled along Kingman's Main Street, which was quieter now as businesses closed for the night. The nearly full moon cast enough light for them to see their way clearly, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage from the surrounding desert. "Will you return to bounty hunting after delivering the creeds to Prescott?" Zara asked as they walked. "Yes. There's always work for someone with my skills, unfortunately." "It sounds dangerous." "It can be," Isaac acknowledged. "But I'm careful. Most of the men I track aren't as clever as they think they are." They had reached the small bridge that crossed the usually dry creek bed at the edge of town. By unspoken agreement, they paused there, looking out at the moonlit desert landscape. "What about you?" Isaac asked. "Will you stay in Kingman long term?" "I don't know," Zara admitted. "I came here seeking a fresh start, and I've found it in many ways. The town has been welcoming, and there's certainly no shortage of patience. But, but I sometimes wonder if there might be more for me somewhere else, a larger town, perhaps, with more resources for my patients." She smiled ruefully. "Or maybe I'm just restless by nature." "I understand restlessness," Isaac said quietly. "It's what keeps me moving from town to town, always chasing the next bounty." There was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with that existence, despite his evident skill at it. Zara wondered what it would take for a man like Isaac Foster to settle in one place, to build something lasting rather than constantly being in motion. "You ever think about stopping?" she asked. "Finding a place to call home?" Isaac was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I did once," he finally said. "I was married briefly before I started bounty hunting." The revelation surprised Zara. "I didn't know. Few do. Her name was Rebecca. We met in Dallas after I left the Rangers. She was—" He paused, searching for words. "She was everything I wasn't, kind, gentle, saw the good in everyone." "What happened?" Zara asked softly, sensing the pain beneath his matter-of-fact tone. "Fever took her. 3 years ago now, we'd been married less than a year." His jaw tightened. "After that, staying in one place seemed pointless, so I started hunting bounties, moving from town to town." "I'm so sorry, Isaac." Without thinking, Zara placed her hand on his arm in a gesture of comfort. He looked down at her hand, then covered it with his own. "Thank you." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding and a connection that had formed more quickly than either would have expected. Finally, Isaac cleared his throat and gently released her hand. "I should get you home," he said. "It's getting late, and you likely have patients early tomorrow." Zara nodded, though she was reluctant for the evening to end. As they walked back toward her office, she found herself wishing that Isaac weren't leaving the next day, that there might be more time to explore this unexpected connection between them. At her door, they paused, the moment awkward yet charged with possibility. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Zara said. It was refreshing to talk with someone who understands the challenges of forging a different path. "The pleasure was mine," Isaac replied. "You're an extraordinary woman, Zara Winters. Kingman is fortunate to have you." "Will you come say goodbye before you leave tomorrow?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. "The stage departs at noon," he said. "I'll stop by in the morning if that's agreeable." "Very agreeable." For a moment, Zara thought he might kiss her. His eyes briefly dropped to her lips before returning to meet her gaze. But instead, he took her hand and raised it to his lips in a courtly gesture that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance, yet somehow perfectly suited to the man she was coming to know. "Good night, Doctor," he said softly. "Good night, Mr. Foster." As Zara watched him walk away, she felt a peculiar ache in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent injuries. and everything to do with the knowledge that tomorrow Isaac Foster would ride away from Kingman and perhaps out of her life entirely. Morning arrived with an unexpected commotion. Zara had just finished dressing when an urgent knocking at her door drew her attention. Opening it, she found Sheriff Dawson, his face grave. "Doc, you'd better come quick," he said. "Jasper Creed's taken a bad turn." Zara grabbed her medical bag without hesitation. "How bad?" "Burning up with fever, delirious. Started around dawn." They hurried to the jailhouse, where Isaac was already present, his expression concerned as he watched the youngest Creed thrash weakly on his cot. Silas paced in the adjacent cell, his face twisted with worry for his brother. "Let me examine him," Zara said, entering the cell. Jasper's condition had deteriorated significantly overnight. His skin burned with fever, and the wound showed clear signs of advancing infection. When Zara lifted his eyelids, his pupils reacted sluggishly to the light, a worrying sign. "He needs surgery," she announced after completing her examination. "The infection has spread. I need to clean the wound more thoroughly and drain it, or he won't survive the day." "Can't you do that here?" Sheriff Dawson asked. Zara shook her head. "I need my proper instruments, better light, and a cleaner environment." "You can't seriously be suggesting we move him to your office," the sheriff protested. "He's a prisoner, Doc, a dangerous one." "He's unconscious and will likely remain so," Zara pointed out. "And at this moment, he's also my patient. Without proper treatment, he will die before he reaches Prescott." From the adjacent cell, Silas spoke up. "Listen to her, Sheriff. That's my little brother." The genuine concern in the outlaw's voice surprised Zara. It was the first human emotion she'd witnessed from him that wasn't rage or cruelty. Sheriff Dawson looked to Isaac, who had remained silent during the exchange. "What do you think, Foster?" Isaac considered for a moment. "Dr. Winters knows her business. If she says he needs surgery, I believe her." He turned to Zara. "I'll help transport him to your office and stand guard while you work." "This goes against my better judgment," Sheriff Dawson grumbled, "but I won't have a man die in my jail if it can be prevented." With the decision made, Isaac and the sheriff carefully moved Jasper onto a makeshift stretcher. As they prepared to leave, Silas called out to Zara. "Doc," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Save him if you can. He's not like me. Got pulled into this life following his big brother. He deserves a second chance." Zara nodded, surprised by the glimpse of humanity in the hardened outlaw. "I'll do my best." At her office, Zara quickly prepared for surgery while Isaac and the sheriff positioned Jasper on her examination table. The young man's condition was deteriorating rapidly. "Sheriff, I'll need hot water and as many clean towels as you can find," Zara instructed. "Mr. Foster, if you could assist me directly." Sheriff Dawson hurried to fulfill her request, leaving Isaac to help Zara prepare. "Have you done this before?" she asked as she laid out her surgical instruments. "Assisted with surgery?" "Yes, during the war. Not professionally, but I've seen enough field operations to know my way around." "Good. I'll need steady hands and a strong stomach." The next hour was intense as Zara worked methodically to clean and drain the infected wound. Isaac proved to be an excellent assistant, calm, focused, and quick to anticipate her needs. His large hands, which she had seen wield weapons with lethal efficiency, now worked with surprising gentleness as he held instruments and applied pressure where directed. Finally, Zara stepped back, wiping perspiration from her brow. "I've done all I can. The rest depends on his constitution and God's will." "Will he live?" Isaac asked. "If the infection doesn't spread further, yes, I believe so, but he won't be traveling to Prescott today. He needs at least a week of rest and careful monitoring." Sheriff Dawson, who had returned with the requested supplies and observed the latter part of the surgery, sighed heavily. "That complicates matters. The regular stage won't be back through for another week, and I can't spare deputies to guard him here for that long." "I can stay," Isaac said, the words seeming to surprise him as much as the others. "What about the bounty?" Sheriff Dawson asked. "Don't you need to deliver them personally? The warrant specifies the Creed gang, dead or alive." "I've already fulfilled the terms by capturing Silas, who's the primary target. The territorial marshal in Prescott can verify my claim when Silas arrives." Isaac glanced at Zara. "If Dr. Winters is willing to have a patient recovering in her office for a week, I'll stay to guard him." Zara tried to hide her pleasure at this unexpected development. "I have a small recovery room in the back. It's where I keep patients who need observation overnight. He can stay there." With the decision made, they moved Jasper to the recovery room. Sheriff Dawson returned to the jail to prepare the other prisoners for transport, leaving Isaac to stand guard over the unconscious outlaw. As Zara cleaned her instruments, she found herself sneaking glances at Isaac, who sat in a chair by the recovery room door, his revolver within easy reach. "You didn't have to volunteer to stay," she said finally. "I'm sure the sheriff could have arranged something." Isaac met her gaze steadily. "Perhaps I had my own reasons for wanting to remain in Kingman a while longer." The implication in his words sent a warm flush through Zara. "And what reasons might those be, Mr. Foster?" Before he could answer, a knock at the door announced the arrival of her first patient of the day. The moment of intimacy passed, but the look in Isaac's eyes promised that the conversation wasn't over merely postponed. The next few days established a new routine. Zara continued to see her regular patients while monitoring Jasper's condition, which improved gradually as the infection receded. Isaac remained a constant presence, guarding the prisoner and assisting Zara when needed. Their evenings were spent in conversation over shared meals, either at the hotel dining room or in Zara's small kitchen. Isaac proved to be well-read despite his rugged profession, and Zara found their discussions stimulating in a way she hadn't experienced since leaving Philadelphia. On the fourth evening after Jasper's surgery, they sat on the small porch behind Zara's office, watching the sunset paint the desert landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, Jasper slept peacefully, his fever finally broken and his recovery proceeding well. "He'll be strong enough to travel by the time the stage comes through next week," Zara observed, sipping a glass of lemonade. "Yes," Isaac agreed, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely pleased with this development. "Will you escort him to Prescott yourself?" "I should." "Complete the job properly." Zara nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that crept into her heart. "Of course. And then on to the next bounty, I suppose." Isaac was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "Unless I had a reason to come back." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Zara's heart quickened as she turned to look at him. "Would you want such a reason?" she asked quietly. Instead of answering directly, Isaac set down his glass and reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they enfolded hers. "I haven't felt this way since Rebecca," he admitted, his voice low. "I didn't expect to, ever again. Certainly not in a dusty little town like Kingman, and definitely not for a stubborn, brave woman doctor who insists on treating outlaws the same as honest citizens." Zara smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. "And I never expected to find myself drawn to a bounty hunter with surprising depths beneath his rugged exterior. Is that what's happening here? You're drawn to me." "I believe I am," she confessed. "Rather against my better judgment, I might add." Isaac's smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges worn by years of tracking the territory's most dangerous men. "Your judgment seems perfectly sound to me." Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward. When she didn't retreat, he closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle yet filled with promise. Zara responded in kind, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they finally parted, the sunset had deepened to twilight, the first stars appearing in the eastern sky. Neither spoke immediately, content to savor the moment and the new understanding that had blossomed between them. "What happens now?" Zara finally asked. "That depends," Isaac replied. "On what you want, on what I can offer." "And what can you offer?" He considered the question seriously. "Not a conventional life, at least not immediately. I have obligations, bounties I've committed to pursuing. But I can offer honesty, respect, and a promise to return whenever I can until—" "Until," she prompted when he hesitated. "Until perhaps I find a different way to use my skills, one that doesn't require constant travel." The suggestion that he might consider changing his way of life for her touched Zara deeply. "I wouldn't ask you to give up what you do." "It clearly matters to you." "It has mattered," he acknowledged. "But priorities can change. People can change given sufficient motivation." The conversation might have continued, but a sound from inside the office alerted them to Jasper awakening. Their private moment interrupted, they returned to their respective roles, doctor and guard, though something fundamental had shifted between them. The remaining days before the stage's arrival passed quickly. Jasper continued to improve, regaining strength and clarity. Though he remained a prisoner, Zara noted a change in his demeanor, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been present before, and a surprising gratitude toward her for saving his life. On the morning the stage was due to arrive, Jasper asked to speak with Zara alone. Isaac reluctantly agreed, standing just outside the doorway while they talked. "I know I'm bound for prison, Doc," Jasper said, sitting on the edge of his cot. "And I deserve it for the things I've done, but I wanted to thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for treating me like a person, not just an outlaw." "Every patient deserves dignity," Zara replied, "regardless of their past actions. Sila's always said following him would make me somebody important." Jasper shook his head ruefully. "All it did was make me a wanted man and nearly got me killed." "It's not too late to choose a different path," Zara suggested. "You're young yet. You'll serve your time, but afterward you could build a different life." Jasper nodded slowly. "Maybe, if I live that long." He hesitated, then added, "Silas won't forgive easily, you know. Not you, not Foster, not anyone involved in capturing him. He's not a man who forgets." "Is that a threat, Mr. Creed?" "No, madam. A warning, from someone who knows him better than most." Jasper met her gaze directly. "Be careful, Doc. Even from prison, Silas has ways of reaching out." Before Zara could respond, the sound of the approaching stage interrupted their conversation. Isaac appeared in the doorway. "It's time," he said simply. The journey to the stagecoach office was somber. Jasper, his hands secured in front of him, walked between Isaac and Sheriff Dawson, who had come to oversee the transfer. Zara accompanied them, concerned about her patient's condition despite his status as a prisoner. At the station, the other members of the Creed gang, including Silas, were already loaded into the specially reinforced coach. Extra guards sat atop the vehicle, shotguns at the ready. As Jasper was helped aboard, Silas's gaze fell on Zara and Isaac. "This ain't over, Foster," he called out, his voice carrying easily in the morning air. "Not by a long shot. You think about that when you're lying awake at night." "Save your breath, Creed," Isaac replied evenly. "You'll need it to plead for mercy at your trial." With a final glare, Silas disappeared into the coach. The door was secured, and the driver cracked his whip. As the stage pulled away in a cloud of dust, Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders, though Jasper's warning echoed in her mind. Sheriff Dawson bid them good day and returned to his office, leaving Zara and Isaac standing alone in front of the stage station. So, Zara said, turning to Isaac, what happens now? Will you be leaving to pursue your next bounty? Isaac studied her face, his expression thoughtful. I should. There's a bank robber operating near Flagstaff who has a healthy reward on his head. Zara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course, your work is important. It is, he agreed, but perhaps it can wait a while longer. Hope flickered in Zara's chest. How much longer? That depends, Isaac said, taking her hand in his. How long would it take for a man like me to properly court a woman like you? A smile bloomed on Zara's face, bright as the morning sun. I believe that would require a significant investment of time, Mr. Foster. Certainly weeks. Possibly months. In that case, Isaac replied, his own smile matching hers, I'd better get started right away. As they walked hand in hand back toward Zara's office, the future stretched before them, uncertain in its details but filled with possibility. For a woman who had fled scandal in the East, and a man who had spent years chasing violence across the frontier, it was a beginning neither could have anticipated, but both embraced with open hearts. The weeks that followed saw a gradual transformation in both their lives. Isaac sent a telegram to the territorial marshal's office, informing them of his intention to delay pursuit of his next bounty. Instead, he took temporary work as a deputy in Kingman, assisting Sheriff Dawson, whose aging bones appreciated the help. For Zara, the change was more subtle but no less significant. Having grown accustomed to independence and solitude, she now found herself sharing many of her evenings with Isaac. They dined together regularly, attended the occasional town social event, and spent countless hours in conversation on her porch, watching the desert sunsets. The town observed their courtship with interest. Some, like Mrs. Peterson, the baker's wife, expressed approval, glad to see their doctor finding happiness. Others, particularly the unattached women of Kingman who had hoped to catch Isaac's eye, were less enthusiastic. But the general consensus was that the doctor and the bounty hunter made a surprisingly well-matched pair. One afternoon in late May, about 6 weeks after the Creeds had been transported to Prescott, Isaac arrived at Zara's office just as she was finishing with her last patient of the day. His expression was serious in a way that immediately caught her attention. "What is it?" she asked once they were alone. "Has something happened?" Isaac nodded, pulling a telegram from his pocket. "News from Prescott. The Creed's trial concluded yesterday. And Silas was sentenced to hang for the Tucson murders. Jasper got 20 years for his role in the gang's activities." Zara absorbed this information quietly. While she couldn't mourn Silas's fate, given the brutality of his crimes, she felt a pang of sympathy for Jasper, who seemed to have genuinely regretted his choices. "When is the execution scheduled?" she asked. 2 weeks from now." Isaac hesitated, then added, "They've requested I be present as the principal witness. Will you go?" "I should. It's part of completing the job I started." He studied her face. "Would you consider coming with me? We could make a proper trip of it." Prescott's a fine city with amenities Kingman lacks. The invitation surprised Zara. "You want me to accompany you to a hanging?" "Not to the hanging itself," Isaac clarified, "but to Prescott. It would give us a chance to see more of the territory together and—" He hesitated, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in his expression. "I've grown accustomed to your company, Zara. The thought of being apart for even a week doesn't sit well with me." The simple admission touched her deeply. "Then I'll come," she decided. "I can arrange for Dr. Thompson from Hackberry to cover my patients for a few days." The journey to Prescott was planned for the following week, allowing time for Zara to arrange coverage for her practice, and for Isaac to coordinate with Sheriff Dawson regarding his temporary duties. 3 days before their scheduled departure, disaster struck. A telegram arrived for Isaac from the Prescott Marshal's office with devastating news. During a prisoner transfer within the jail, Silas Creed had overpowered a guard, taken his weapon, and escaped. 2 guards had been killed in the process. Silas was now at large, presumably armed, and considered extremely dangerous. "I have to go immediately," Isaac told Zara as soon as he received the news. "They're organizing a manhunt, and they need experienced trackers." "I understand," Zara said, though her heart sank at the thought of him pursuing the dangerous outlaw. "When will you leave tomorrow's stage? I've already wired acceptance." He took her hands in his. "This changes our plans. You should remain here where it's safe." Zara nodded, knowing he was right but hating the separation nonetheless. "How long will you be gone?" "As long as it takes to recapture Creed." Isaac's expression was grim. "He's too dangerous to be left at large, and after I come back to you." He drew her closer, his voice lowering. "That's a promise, Zara. Whatever happens, I will come back." That night they dined quietly at the hotel, both preoccupied with thoughts of the impending separation. Later, as Isaac walked Zara home beneath a star-filled sky, he stopped at her doorstep, taking both her hands in his. "I have something I need to ask you," he said, his voice unusually solemn. "Something I'd planned to wait on, but circumstances have changed." Zara's heart quickened. "What is it?" "I know our courtship has been brief by conventional standards, barely 2 months. But I've lived enough to recognize what matters when I find it." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Zara Winters. I think I have since that night at the Rusty Nail when you showed more courage than most men I've known." Tears sprang to Zara's eyes at his declaration. "I love you too, Isaac. More than I thought possible after such a short time. Then, if you're willing," he continued, "I'd like to make it official before I leave. Not a wedding that deserves time and preparation, but an engagement, something to hold on to while we're apart." Without hesitation, Zara nodded. "Yes. Yes, I would like that very much." From his pocket, Isaac withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I didn't have time to have a proper ring made," he explained as he opened it, "but I found this at Simpson's Mercantile yesterday." The ring he revealed was simple but beautiful, a small sapphire set in silver, its deep blue reminiscent of Isaac's eyes. "It's perfect," Zara breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. He sealed their engagement with a kiss that carried both the promise of a shared future and the bittersweet knowledge of their imminent separation. The next morning dawned clear and warm, a typical Arizona day that gave no indication of the emotional turmoil Zara felt as she prepared to bid Isaac farewell. She met him at the stage station, where Sheriff Dawson and a few other townspeople had gathered to see him off. "You bring that snake Creed to justice, Foster," Sheriff Dawson said gruffly, shaking Isaac's hand. "And then you get yourself back here. Got a wedding to plan, I hear." Word of their engagement had spread quickly through the small town, and Zara felt a flush of pleasure at the genuine congratulations offered by the gathered well-wishers. When the stage was ready to depart, Isaac took Zara aside for a private farewell. "Be vigilant while I'm gone," he warned, his expression serious. "Creed made threats against both of us. I don't think he'd come this way, but—" "I'll be careful," Zara promised. "And you please don't take unnecessary risks. I expect my fiancé to return in one piece." "I'll do my best." He kissed her one last time, then boarded the waiting stage. As the coach pulled away, Zara fought back tears, the weight of her worry tempered only by the comforting presence of the ring on her finger and the promise it represented. Days stretched into weeks as Zara waited for news from Prescott. Telegraph reports indicated that the manhunt for Silas Creed continued, with several false leads but no confirmed sightings. Isaac's letters arrived sporadically, brief but reassuring. He was well, the search continued, and his thoughts were constantly with her. Life in Kingman carried on. Zara's practice remained busy, with a summer influenza outbreak keeping her working long hours. The physical demands of her profession were a blessing, occupying her mind and leaving her too exhausted at day's end to dwell on worries for Isaac's safety. Nearly a month after Isaac's departure, Zara was returning to her office late one evening after attending a difficult childbirth when she noticed something amiss. The lamp she always left burning in the front window had been extinguished, and the door, which she distinctly remembered locking, stood slightly ajar. Caution made her hesitate on the porch. Isaac's warnings about Sela's creed echoed in her mind, giving her pause. But her medical bag contained supplies she needed, and her logical mind argued that Creed was unlikely to have made his way to Kingman with the entire territorial law enforcement looking for him. Taking a deep breath, Zara pushed the door open, straining to see in the darkness of her normally welcoming office. Before she could locate a lamp to light, a hand clamped over her mouth from behind and a familiar voice hissed in her ear. Not a sound, Doc, or you'll regret it. Sela's Creed. Here in her office, Zara's blood ran cold as the outlaw dragged her inside, kicking the door closed behind them. Been a long time coming, this reunion, Sela said, releasing her mouth but keeping a painful grip on her arm. You and Foster made quite a mess of my plans. Got my brother sent to prison, me sentenced to hang. How did you find me? Zara asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Sela's chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. Wasn't hard. Whole territories talking about Foster's lady doctor back in Kingman. Had to see for myself if it was true. Followed the stage route, keeping to the hills. No one looks up, you know. In the dim light filtering through the windows, Zara could see that Creed looked haggard, his clothes dirty and torn, his face gaunt with hunger and exhaustion. But his eyes burned with the same malevolence she remembered, perhaps even more intensely now. What do you want? She asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Revenge, plain and simple. Sela's gestured with his revolver toward a chair. Sit down. We're going to wait for your fiancé to come to the rescue. I hear he's quite the hero. Isaac's not in Kingman, Zara informed him, remaining standing despite the implied threat. He's in Prescott looking for you. Sela's face darkened. You're lying. I'm not. He left the day after your escape was reported. He's been gone for weeks. Uncertainty flashed across Sela's features, quickly replaced by anger. Then I'll just have to send him a message he can't ignore. Before Zara could react, Sela struck her across the face with the barrel of his revolver, sending her sprawling to the floor. Pain exploded in her cheek as warm blood trickled from the gash the blow had opened. Get up, Sela ordered. We're taking a little trip. Foster wants to be a hero. Let's see him find you before it's too late. Dazed from the blow, Zara struggled to her feet. She needed to think to find a way out of this nightmare. Isaac was miles away in Prescott, and no one in town was likely to notice her absence until morning at the earliest. I have patients who will miss me, she said, buying time. People will look for me. By the time they figure out what happened, we'll be long gone. Sela's grabbed her arm again, shoving her toward the back door. Move. Outside, 2 horses waited, tethered to a post behind her office where they wouldn't be easily spotted from the street. Sela's forced Zara onto one, then mounted the other, keeping his revolver trained on her. We ride north, he instructed. Try to run and I'll put a bullet in your back. Understand, Zara nodded, her mind racing. She was a competent rider every doctor in the territory needed to be, but she had no illusions about outpacing a man like Creed. Her best chance would be to leave signs of their passage, hoping someone would notice her absence soon and follow. As they rode out of town, keeping to back alleys until they reached the open desert, Zara deliberately dropped her handkerchief near the last buildings. It wasn't much, but it was something. The night was cold, as desert nights often were regardless of the daytime heat. Zara shivered in her lightweight dress, which offered little protection against the chill air. Silas, noticing, laughed cruelly. "Cold, Doc, don't worry. Where we're going, you won't feel cold for long." They rode through the night, pushing the horses hard. Zara's medical training told her that Creed was running on desperation, and probably hadn't slept properly since his escape. That might give her an advantage eventually, but for now, his determination and thirst for revenge seemed to be sustaining him. As dawn broke over the eastern mountains, they entered a region of rugged canyons and mesas that Zara didn't recognize. Creed led them deeper into this wilderness, finally stopping at the entrance to a narrow canyon. "Home sweet home," he announced mockingly. "At least for what's left of your life." Inside the canyon, a crude campsite had been established evidence that Creed had prepared this hideout in advance. A small cave provided shelter, and a trickle of water from the canyon wall supplied a basic need. Silas dismounted, then yanked Zara from her horse, causing her to stumble and fall painfully to her knees on the rocky ground. "Not so high and mighty now, are you, Doc?" he taunted, pulling her to her feet and shoving her toward the cave. "Sit down and don't move. I need to rest before deciding exactly how to dispose of you." Zara sat against the cave wall, her mind working furiously. Creed was exhausted, that much was clear. If he slept, she might have a chance to escape. But even if she managed to get away from the campsite, she was unfamiliar with this territory and had no clear idea of which direction to flee. Silas secured the horses, then settled himself at the cave entrance, his revolver never far from his hand. "Don't get any ideas," he warned. "I'm a light sleeper." To demonstrate his point, he tied a piece of rope from his wrist to hers, ensuring that any movement she made would alert him. Then, leaning back against the cave wall, he allowed his eyes to close, though Zara suspected he wasn't fully sleeping not yet. The hours passed slowly. The sun rose higher, heating the canyon to uncomfortable levels. Thirst plagued Zara, but she refused to show weakness by asking for water. Instead, she observed Creed carefully, noting that his breathing had eventually deepened into the rhythm of true sleep. Cautiously, she tested the rope binding them. It was securely tied, but perhaps not impossible to loosen if she had time. Using her free hand, she began to work at the knot around her wrist, careful to make no sudden movements that might wake her captor. Her progress was painfully slow, but gradually the knot began to give. Just as she felt it start to loosen significantly, Silas stirred. Instantly, Zara stilled her movements, feigning sleep herself. Creed's eyes opened, immediately alert despite his exhaustion. He checked the rope between them, apparently satisfied that it remained secure, then rose to his feet. "Thirsty, Doc?" he asked, noticing her parched lips. "Yes," she admitted. He retrieved a canteen from his saddlebag and offered it to her. The water was warm and had a metallic taste, but Zara drank gratefully, knowing she needed to maintain her strength if she was to survive this ordeal. "Why are you doing this?" she asked as she handed the canteen back. "You must know that kidnapping me only makes your situation worse. The entire territory is already looking for you." "I'm already sentenced to hang," Silas replied matter-of-factly. "Can't get much worse than that, but I can make sure Foster suffers before they catch me. An eye for an eye, Doc. He took my freedom. I take what matters to him." "Isaac was doing his job," Zara argued. "You murdered an innocent family." Silas's expression hardened. "Don't lecture me on right and wrong, woman. You have no idea what drives a man to do what I've done." "Then tell me," Zara challenged, hoping to engage him in conversation that might reveal something useful. "What drove you to become the man you are?" For a moment, she thought he might strike her again. But instead, Silas laughed harshly. "Nice try, Doc, trying to find some humanity in the monster." Some sad story that explains it all. There isn't one. Some men are just born to raise hell. He checked the position of the sun, which was now high in the sky. We'll rest here till evening, then move on. There's a place a few miles north where no one will ever find what's left of you. A message Foster won't soon forget. The casual way he spoke of her murder sent chills through Zara, but she refused to show fear. Instead, she focused on the rope around her wrist, waiting for another opportunity to work at the knot. It came sooner than expected. A sound from outside the canyon, perhaps a falling rock or a desert animal, caught Creed's attention. He moved to the cave entrance, revolver drawn, to investigate. With his back turned, Zara quickly resumed her efforts to loosen the knot. This time, success came more quickly. The rope, weakened by her earlier attempts, gave way with a final tug. Zara kept her hand in place, the rope still looped around her wrist but no longer binding her. Now she needed to wait for the right moment to act. Silas returned to the cave, having found nothing concerning outside. "Just a coyote," he muttered, settling back down. As the afternoon wore on, Zara noticed Silas fighting to stay awake, his exhaustion clearly catching up with him. Eventually, despite his best efforts, his head drooped and his breathing deepened once more. This was her chance. Slowly, carefully, Zara slipped the rope from her wrist. She considered attempting to take Creed's revolver, but decided the risk was too great. Instead, she eased herself to her feet and crept toward the cave entrance. Just as she reached the opening, a loose stone shifted beneath her foot, creating a slight noise. Silas's eyes snapped open, instantly alert. "You bitch," he snarled, lunging for her. Zara didn't hesitate. She bolted from the cave, running for the canyon entrance as fast as her legs would carry her. Behind her, she heard Creed's heavy footsteps and his curses as he pursued. The canyon was longer than she'd realized, its twisting path making the entrance seem further away with each step. Zara's lungs burned with exertion, and her dress caught on brush and rock, slowing her progress. Still, fear lent her speed she didn't know she possessed. She had almost reached the canyon's mouth when a shot rang out, the bullet striking rock near her head. Fragments of stone cut her cheek, but she didn't slow her pace. "Next one goes in your back," Creed shouted, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. Zara darted behind a boulder just as another shot was fired. She was trapped now, the canyon entrance tantalizingly close, but impossible to reach without exposing herself to Creed's aim. "Come out now, and I'll make it quick," Silas called, his voice closer now. "Keep running, and I'll make sure you suffer." Zara's mind raced. The horses were back at the camp, so even if she made it out of the canyon, she'd be on foot in unfamiliar, harsh terrain. But staying meant certain death. She had to try. Taking a deep breath, she prepared to make a dash for the entrance. But before she could move, the sound of approaching hoofbeats reached her ears. Riders, coming fast toward the canyon. Silas heard them too. His head whipped around, his expression momentarily uncertain before hardening with determination. "Seems we have company," he muttered, ducking behind cover himself. The riders appeared at the canyon entrance, 3 men on horseback, all armed. Leading them, to Zara's overwhelming relief, was Isaac. "Creed," Isaac called out, his voice echoing through the canyon. "We know you're in there. Release Dr. Winters and surrender." "Come and get her, Foster," Silas shouted back, firing a shot in the direction of the riders, forcing them to take cover. From her position behind the boulder, Zara could see both groups, Isaac and the 2 deputies with him, at the canyon entrance, and Silas about 20 yards away from her, partially concealed by an outcropping of rock. "Zara," Isaac called. "Are you all right? I'm here." She responded, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm unharmed. Stay down," Isaac instructed. "We'll get you out." A tense standoff ensued. Silas, though outnumbered, had the advantage of higher ground and good cover. Occasional shots were exchanged, but neither side could gain a clear advantage. As the standoff continued, Zara assessed her situation. The boulder she was hiding behind provided good protection, but she was effectively pinned down. Any attempt to reach Isaac would expose her to Creed's fire. Then she noticed something, a narrow crevice in the canyon wall near her position. It appeared to lead upward, potentially providing a route to circle behind Creed's position. It would be risky, but it might be her only chance to help end this situation. Making her decision, Zara waited until Silas was distracted by exchanging fire with the lawman, then slipped quietly into the crevice. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, but it did indeed lead upward along the canyon wall. The climb was treacherous. Loose rocks threatened to give away her position, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. But Zara persevered, using her knowledge of human anatomy to find the best handholds and distribute her weight effectively. After what felt like an eternity, she reached a small ledge that overlooked Creed's position. From here, she could see him clearly, still exchanging occasional shots with Isaac and the deputies. She had no weapon, but she did have the element of surprise. Looking around, Zara spotted several large rocks on the ledge, weathered loose from the canyon wall over time. Gathering her courage, she picked up the largest she could manage and positioned herself directly above Creed. Taking a deep breath, she called out, "Silas, look up." As he instinctively glanced upward, Zara dropped the rock. It struck him squarely, not enough to seriously injure, but sufficient to stun him and cause him to drop his revolver. "Now, Isaac," she shouted. Isaac and the deputies seized the opportunity, rushing forward as Silas scrambled for his weapon. Before he could reach it, Isaac was upon him, tackling him to the ground. The fight was brief but violent. Silas fought with the desperation of a man who knew he faced the gallows, but Isaac's righteous fury proved the stronger force. With a final, devastating blow, he rendered Creed unconscious. As the deputies secured the outlaw with handcuffs, Isaac turned his attention to Zara, who was carefully making her way down from the ledge. "Zara," he called, rushing to help her. "Are you hurt?" The moment her feet touched the ground, Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She didn't mind. After the ordeal she'd endured, the safety of his embrace was exactly what she needed. "I'm all right," she assured him, though tears of relief were now streaming down her face. "How did you find me?" "Sheriff Dawson telegraphed Prescott when you didn't show up for your morning appointments," Isaac explained, finally relaxing his grip enough to look at her properly, his eyes cataloging her injuries with concern. "One of your patients had seen a stranger matching Creed's description lurking near your office the previous evening. But how did you know to look here? Your handkerchief helped, and I've been tracking men like Creed for years. I know how they think, where they'd likely go to ground." His voice broke slightly. "I was terrified I'd be too late." "You weren't," Zara said simply, reaching up to touch his face. "You found me." One of the deputies approached, leading the horses they'd recovered from Creed's campsite. "We should head back faster. It'll be dark soon, and we've got a prisoner to secure." Isaac nodded, but his attention remained fixed on Zara. "Can you ride?" "Yes," she assured him, though her body ached from the ordeal. "I want to go home." The journey back to Kingman was slow but uneventful. Creed, who had regained consciousness, rode in sullen silence, his hands bound and a deputy keeping close watch on him. Zara rode beside Isaac, drawing strength from his presence and the knowledge that her nightmare was finally over. They reached town well after nightfall. A crowd had gathered despite the late hour, word having spread quickly that Dr. Winters had been kidnapped and that Isaac Foster had gone after her. A cheer went up as they rode down the main street, relief evident on the faces of townsfolk, who had come to value their doctor highly in her short time among them. Sheriff Dawson personally escorted Creed to a cell, ensuring he was secured with extra precautions. "No chances this time," he muttered as he locked the iron door. "He'll be on his way to Prescott with a double guard tomorrow." Isaac took Zara directly to her office, where Dr. Thompson from Hackberry, who had been covering her patients in her absence, waited anxiously. The older physician insisted on examining Zara immediately, shooing Isaac out of the room while he tended to the cut on her cheek and assessed her other injuries. "You'll be sore for a while," Dr. Thompson concluded after his examination. "That gash might leave a small scar, but otherwise, you're remarkably unscathed for someone who spent a day as Silas Creed's captive." "Thank you for coming, Dr. Thompson," Zara said sincerely, "and for looking after my patients. Least I could do. We doctors have to stick together out here." He patted her hand. "Get some rest now, I'll see myself out." When Isaac was allowed to return, he found Zara sitting in her office chair, a cup of tea in her hands, looking exhausted but composed. "Dr. Thompson says you'll be fine," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I will be," she agreed. "Thanks to you." Isaac knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "When I got that telegram." He shook his head, unable to complete the thought. "I've never ridden so hard in my life." "You found me," Zara repeated, the simple fact still something of a miracle to her. "How did you know where to look?" "A hunch, mostly. That area of canyons is known to outlaws as a good hiding place, and there were signs, broken brush, horse tracks heading north. Once we found the general direction, it was a matter of searching methodically. Well, your hunch saved my life." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "I never doubted you'd come." "I always will," he promised. "Wherever you are, whatever happens, I'll find you." The quiet declaration, spoken in the warm security of her office with the nightmare behind them, held more meaning than any elaborate vow could have. In that moment, Zara knew with absolute certainty that her future was bound to this man who had fought his way into a saloon to save a stranger, and then tracked across the wilderness to save the woman he loved. "I don't want to wait," she said suddenly. "Wait," Isaac repeated, puzzled. "To be married. Life is too uncertain, too precious to delay happiness." She met his gaze directly. "Unless you've changed your mind." "Never," he assured her. "I'd marry you tomorrow if you wished it." "Then let's do exactly that." The next day, as Silas Creed was transported under heavy guard to Prescott to face his fate, Zara Winters and Isaac Foster were married in a simple ceremony at Kingman's small church. The entire town turned out to witness the union of their doctor and the bounty hunter who had twice saved her. Sheriff Dawson gave the bride away, and Mrs. Peterson provided a wedding cake that, while modest by Eastern standards, represented the pinnacle of frontier baking expertise. Zara wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes and carried wildflowers gathered by the schoolchildren that morning. As they exchanged vows, the contrast between this joyous moment and the danger they had faced just a day before was not lost on either of them. Perhaps it even deepened the significance of their commitment, highlighting the precious nature of the life they were choosing to build together. "I, Isaac, take you, Zara, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Isaac's strong voice carried clearly through the church. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. I, Zara, take you, Isaac, to be my lawfully wedded husband," Zara responded, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her chest. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with a tenderness that belied his rugged exterior, sealing their union amidst the applause and well wishes of the gathered community. The celebration that followed was lively, reflecting the frontier spirit of making the most of life's joyous moments. There was music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire town twice over, as every household had contributed something to the wedding feast. As the afternoon waned, Isaac pulled Zara aside from the festivities, leading her to a quiet corner of the town square. "I have something to show you," he said, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his manner. "A wedding gift of sorts, though it's not quite ready yet." Curious, Zara allowed him to lead her down a side street to a modest house set slightly apart from the others. It was newer than most buildings in Kingman, with fresh paint and a small porch. "What is this?" she asked as they stopped at the gate. "Our home," Isaac replied, watching her reaction closely. "If you approve." I started arrangements for its purchase before I left for Prescott, and Sheriff Dawson completed the transaction in my absence. It needs some work inside, but it's solid and there's room for. Zara prompted when he hesitated. "For a family someday, if you want that." Tears sprang to Zara's eyes as she took in the simple home their home. It represented something she had scarcely dared to hope for after leaving Philadelphia. Not just professional respect and independence, but a true partnership, a shared life with someone who valued her for exactly who she was. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning to embrace him. "But what about your work? Bounty hunting isn't exactly conducive to settled family life." "I've been thinking about that," Isaac admitted. "The territorial governor has offered me a position as a special marshal. It would mean some traveling, but with a base of operations here in Kingman. I'd be gone for days, occasionally weeks, but not months at a time. And you'd be working within the law directly, not just delivering criminals to it." "Exactly. It's time for a change, Zara. The kind of life I've led, it's not one I want to continue now that I have someone to come home to." The decision clearly hadn't been easy for him. Isaac had built his reputation and his life around the freedom and independence of bounty hunting. That he was willing to modify that life so significantly for their future together spoke volumes about his commitment. "I think it sounds wonderful," Zara said sincerely, "and your experience will be invaluable to the territorial authorities." "There's something else," Isaac added. "The house has a separate entrance and a front room that could serve perfectly as a doctor's office. You wouldn't need to maintain space in town." The thoughtfulness of this provision, that he had considered her professional needs alongside their personal ones, touched Zara deeply. "You've thought of everything," she said, leaning up to kiss him softly. "Thank you." As they returned to their wedding celebration, Zara reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From fleeing scandal in Philadelphia to establishing herself as a respected physician in a frontier town, to finding love with a man as complex and courageous as Isaac Foster, none of it had been predictable. Yet all of it now seemed somehow meant to be. The afternoon, Sela's creed had dragged her into the Rusty Nail Saloon, had been the most terrifying of her life. But it had also been the day that brought Isaac Foster into her world, the day a courageous cowboy had fought his way in and carried her out, changing both their lives forever. Epilogue: 5 years later, the summer evening was pleasantly warm as Zara Foster sat on the porch of her home, watching her 4-year-old son Thomas chase fireflies in the front yard. His delighted laughter filled the air as he cupped his hands around one of the glowing insects, then released it to continue its luminous flight. "Careful, Tommy," she called as he ventured near the gate. "Stay in the yard." "Yes, Mama," he replied dutifully, though his attention remained fixed on the dancing lights around him. Beside Zara, their 1-year-old daughter Rebecca slept peacefully in her cradle, her tiny features relaxed in slumber. She was the image of her father, with the same striking blue eyes and determined chin, while Tommy had inherited Zara's blonde hair and analytical mind. The sound of hoofbeats drew Zara's attention to the road. Her heart quickened with recognition as a familiar rider approached Isaac, returning from his latest assignment as territorial marshal. He had been gone for just over a week this time, tracking a gang of cattle rustlers operating near the border. Tommy spotted his father at the same moment. "Papa!" he shouted, abandoning his firefly pursuit to run toward the gate. Isaac dismounted swiftly, lifting his son high into the air as soon as his feet touched the ground. "There's my boy. Have you been taking care of your mother and sister while I was away?" "Yes, sir," Tommy declared proudly. "I helped with patients and everything." "He did indeed," Zara confirmed as Isaac carried their son up to the porch. "He's becoming quite the little medical assistant." Isaac leaned down to kiss her, a lingering contact that still sent warmth through her entire being even after years of marriage. "I missed you," he murmured against her lips. "We missed you too," she replied, savoring his presence. "Successful trip." "Very. Caught the rustlers, recovered most of the stolen cattle, no casualties." He glanced at the sleeping baby. "How's my little Rebecca been?" "Perfect, as always. Just started pulling herself up to stand yesterday." Isaac's face lit up with pride. "Already? She's going to be walking before we know it." "Just like her father, always in a hurry to be on the move," Zara teased. As the evening deepened into twilight, they moved inside. Tommy was put to bed with stories of his father's latest adventure, carefully edited for young ears. Rebecca was transferred to her crib, stirring only briefly before settling back into peaceful sleep. Later, in the privacy of their bedroom, Zara and Isaac reconnected in the intimate way of long married couples who still found joy and comfort in each other's touch. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Zara traced the scar on Isaac's shoulder, a souvenir from a gunfight 3 years earlier that had nearly taken him from her. "I was thinking today about the first time we met," she said softly. "At the Rusty Nail." "Not exactly the most romantic of introductions," Isaac observed with a chuckle. "No, but memorable." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Did you know then that we'd end up here?" Isaac considered the question seriously. "Not consciously. But there was something about you, the way you maintained your dignity and courage even in that situation. I think some part of me recognized even then that you were extraordinary. I just remember feeling safe the moment you appeared. Even with bullets flying and chaos all around, I knew instinctively that you would protect me. And I always will," he promised, drawing her close. "You and our children." Kingman had grown considerably in the 5 years since their marriage. The railroad had finally reached the town, bringing increased commerce and population. Zara's practice had expanded to include a young assistant doctor, allowing her to balance her professional obligations with motherhood. Isaac's position as territorial marshal had earned him respect throughout Arizona. His reputation for fairness and incorruptibility, combined with his tracking skills, made him one of the most effective lawmen in the Southwest. Though his work still required occasional travel, he had kept his promise to make their home in Kingman the center of his life. The scandal that had driven Zara from Philadelphia was now a distant memory, as was Isaac's solitary existence as a bounty hunter. In its place, they had built something neither had dared hope for: a partnership of equals, a family bound by love and mutual respect, and a sense of purpose that extended beyond themselves to the community they served. As Zara drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, she reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them together, how the darkest day of her life had ultimately led to its greatest joy. The outlaw who had dragged her into the saloon had meant to destroy her, but instead had unwittingly set her on the path to finding her true home and the love of her life in the wild, unpredictable landscape of the Arizona Territory. Outside their window, the desert night was alive with stars, silent witnesses to the story of a doctor and a lawman who had found each other against all odds and built a life together that neither would trade for all the gold in the West.